that leads to a next question then. Since, okay, now you're in the world of tech, you've immersed yourself in computers and that kind of thing, went to school for them.
Yep.
Windows. I mean, it seems, at least on the surface, without a deeper look, that you've spent a lot of time covering all things Microsoft and Windows related. Is that by design or more by, it just kind of worked out that way for you?
Right. Well, yeah, it's not by design. In fact, I was almost violently against Microsoft in the early days. Coming up in the very late 1980s and the early 1990s, I was an Amiga guy. Reacted with horror when Windows took off in a mainstream way. In fact, long before there was a Windows, I recalled my father getting an IBM PC, an actual 5150 model, early days IBM PC, and thinking, this is a piece of junk. You've got to be kidding me.
Right.
I just couldn't understand it. I had, Commodore, of course, fell apart, and the Amiga went away essentially. So at some point there in the early 1990s, you had to make a decision. In fact, that first year that I took those classes, I still had an Amiga at that time. In fact, I was supposed to use Turbo Pascal for a particular class, and I used an Amiga Pascal program that could emulate Turbo Pascal or something, as I recall it. But you had to make a decision, and I couldn't afford a Mac, and I figured, the PC, you could build your own PC, you could do so relatively cheaply, and so forth. But of course, at that point, Windows 95 hadn't happened yet. Windows 3.1 was sort of the big thing at the time, which I had no love for at all. And there was some question about where we would go, what would be the operating system that we would use on this machine. So I looked into all kinds of different things. I looked at OS2 and, Windows, of course, and all that. My wife, coincidentally, before she got a job in Phoenix, was temping and was working for a company that was editing technical documentation, and some of the stuff they were doing were classes based around upcoming versions of Microsoft Word. And I remember becoming intrigued by that because that was clearly more sophisticated than anything we had on the Amiga. And then finally, with Gary, the writer, the professor, one of the books we were going to work on was going to be for Windows 4.0, which became Windows 95.
Right.
And when I saw that, I thought, this is it. I mean, they finally crossed the line where it's okay. That this is okay. I mean, there were clearly technical deficiencies there that that weren't obvious on day one, but what it looked like at the time was something fairly clean. It was, graphical and nice looking, and if not object oriented, at least object based, and it seemed like something good, and it seemed like something that people were really going to use. And that was the first. Word was really the first one, and then Windows 95 were those first Microsoft products where I got kind of excited about the Microsoft stuff.
I was using Windows 3.1. I think they called it Windows for Workgroups.
Yeah,
and the networking stack in that thing would break constantly.
Yes, it would.
I mean, and
no, I had Windows for Windows for Workgroups. Windows for Workgroups 3.1, as I recall, was actually you could enable some features in there that would allow the system to access the disk in a certain way, and it would allow the system to access memory in a way that later Windows 95 would just do natively. Right. But it was really the first time they secretly implemented those features. And, it made the system more stable and perform better and so forth. But, it was a piece of junk.
Well, at the time, at the time that was released, I was one of those evil mortgage banker guys. No, I had nothing to do with the subprime mess. But we had all these Windows PCs, and the disk came the day Windows 95 was launched, and it was like 13 floppy disks. Remember those? 13 of those things came in the box, and I spent like 2 days loading it on all these machines on there. But at least the networking worked after it was said and done.
Yeah. We always used Novell networking, and we had WordPerfect products and Windows 3.1, which was awful, and the whole thing was just such a mess. I mean, it was just that was just a bad time.